Okay, Tanisha, I think we can start now.
Yeah. Yes. Sneha, will
Yes,
you begin or should I start
sure.
with the right part?
You can start off if you have anything to begin with, and then I can take over from there.
Tanisha, why don't you begin? Like you introduce Sneha as well. After that, Sneha can give
Okay,
her.
Tanisha, I
Yeah.
think we can start now.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Uh, so we are here today on the occasion of International Day of Persons with Disabilities. It is usually on the 3rd of December every year, but because it was a working day, today we are gathered here. Disability is a part of the human experiences, and WHO recognizes that a world where all people in the highest possible standard of health and well-being is only possible if health systems are inclusive of people with disability. 2020's United Nations theme was Building Back Better towards a disability inclusive, accessible, and sustainable post-COVID 17 world. So WHO supported this theme by underlining the importance of fostering an inclusive culture and responding to the urgent needs of people with disability in all aspects of society, especially during this COVID pandemic. So today, apologies for the disconnection. So we have Sneha with us today. Sneha is an alumnus of Sampurna Montfort College, and she is a gold medalist from Bangalore University. She has been working as a special educator and is now an associate counselor with Lean and Me Counseling Services. So I hand over the mic to Sneha. Sneha, can you hear me?
Yes, Tanisha, thank you so much, and a very good afternoon to all of y'all. Thank you for the introduction, Tanisha. So today I thought we could briefly discuss about disability, about people who are differently abled, some of the current challenges they are facing in our country in spite of inclusions that we do have in our country, right? We do have some campaigns that are running past few years. But at the same time, there have been certain challenges also. So, to begin with, as Tanisha mentioned, it's been a really long time, many years since there has been a lot of talks and inclusions for people who are differently abled, right? And over the years, there definitely have been certain inclusions in different areas, starting from maybe public transport, right? Like buses or in maybe public buildings. If we take a look at some of our malls or even the buildings that are coming up in due course of time, sometimes they do have facilities of ramps, right? So all these are really small ways in which we have been trying to move into an inclusive strategy area. So United Nations had actually begun this whole program where they tried to include people from all over the world and include them in different aspects of facets. So whether it is socially, whether it's economically, politically, right? They tried to include them in each of the areas, and what they felt or what they noticed from, different surveys and things that they did was that most of the time, whether it's in the area of IT or technology or in policy making or while making decisions, there weren't people from the who were differently abled, providing their opinions, sharing their feelings and their challenges, right? And this was the whole crux or the main core of why and how this came about. So, United Nations has been having different themes every year, as Tanisha mentioned, on December 3rd. And on this particular day of the year, they look at different aspects. So, one has been inclusion. Another area that they do try to focus on is different facets. I think they had around 17 different themes on etiquettes, as well as how we could actually focus on really small areas of our life where we could help a person who is differently abled, right? Maybe in the workplace, what are the accommodations we could make over there? Yeah. So these are some things that the United Nations actually did talk about. And before I talk about the inclusion in the IT area, that is information and technology, I thought it would be nice to probably share a video from United Nations itself in order to get a quick idea about what is the current work that they are doing. And in 2020, what is our goal? What are we looking at? Right? So, probably Tanisha or any one of you, maybe in the chat box, once I share the screen, just let me know if you're able to view the screen, all right? Yes, so I shall mute myself now.
There are more than 1 billion people with disabilities in the world. Realizing their rights is a matter of justice and an investment in our common future. It is also central to realizing the core promise of the 2030 Agenda, to leave no one behind. The United Nations Disability Inclusion Strategy is my commitment to achieving transformative change, to raise the UN's performance on disability inclusion, not just in its policy, but also in its programs and operations. Our destination is clear: a world in which all people, including people with disabilities, can enjoy equal opportunities, have a full say in decision-making processes, and truly benefit from economic, social, political, and cultural life. Every person should expect nothing less. Together with people with disabilities as agents of change, we can build an inclusive, accessible, and sustainable world for all. Thank you.
Yes, so I hope all of y'all were able to see that video. Were you?
Yes, yes.
Okay, all right. So, one key takeaway, one beautiful thing that I did notice while searching for that video was they had a sign language translator, right? And I think that's something of late that I have been also noticing in certain speeches. If you look at some of the speeches that have been coming up during the US election time, right? We've had sign translators. And that's a wonderful way to include, an area or a space for people to who find it difficult in order to access technology, to get more information and be more informed, right? And thank you all for watching that video. So as you all did notice, in United Nations, they are carrying on, a large macro level effort. But what about certain other areas? Now, what is it that each one of us can do, living in our respective countries, in our respective cultures, the towns we are in? I'm pretty sure we all could probably try a tiny bit, right? There are different areas that we could look at, but that area or that bit of it, I think by the end of my talk, Tanisha would be probably highlighting. Now, talking about special education, okay. So, special education counseling was another area I thought we could discuss about. So, special education teacher is primarily right now in most of the schools a remedial teacher. So, from my experience, what I'd like to say is for around 1 year and maybe 3 months, I did work as a remedial teacher. And we have students from who have different abilities, right? We do an assessment, we find out what the specific difficulty level of that child is, and we try to create something called an IEP, that is Individualized Education Program. So after we create that IEP, we find out the difficulty area and try to make an adjustment for that particular child. Now, we have inclusive schools today all over our country. I wouldn't say to a very large extent, but we do have some inclusive schools. So what is a typical classroom like, So sometimes what happens is these children tend to get very aggressive, impulsive or violent in the classrooms. And the students who are there along with this particular child, many a time when they're really small, they get taken aback. They don't know what to do and they run complaining to the teacher, "Ma'am, this is what is happening. This is what he is doing. This is what she is doing." And if the teacher is not aware enough, what happens is this catapults, it becomes a bigger issue. It spirals out of control, right? And that teacher may even shout at that particular child in class. But then what a special education teacher or a special education counselor does in such situations is plan beforehand. So in the beginning of the year itself, they probably have workshops for all the teachers, the management, the students alike, and they'll tell the teachers to kind of look at the certain areas that this child finds difficult. For example, one child may find an area where if there's too much of noise, like maybe construction work happening outside, that loud noise irritates them, and that could be an instant trigger for them to feel very impulsive, irritated, and agitated in the classroom, right? So the role of finding out certain of those trigger points is of the special education counselor. And once they find that out, what they do is they talk, develop a team approach, get everybody together and inform them. Now, this is not something very easy because, in schools, we've all been in schools, and we do notice that it's much more easy to run to the teacher and complain to them and say, "No, ma'am, I didn't do this. He's the one who did it," right? So sometimes these special children, they tend to get singled out, and they become the easy target or scapegoats in the classroom, which is not right, which is sometimes when the teachers play along with it also, sometimes it is sad to see that in spite of being aware and sensitive, um, they themselves find it difficult to overcome their beliefs and struggles and try to accommodate such a child, right? Again, there, such a child, that's one common way or lingo that we all tend to use. And sometimes it happens to me too. We all use lingo, language, certain terms that probably could hurt another person. But what's important is noticing that and trying to change that. So in the aspect of special education, so if you do in future want to look at that area, you do have courses for special education teachers. It's an exhaustive course where you learn about the developmental needs and challenges and difficulties, as well as what are the interventions possible, what works or what doesn't work. Just like any of us, one size does not fit all, right? In the same way, even for them, there are certain interventions that may work, that may not work. It's a long process, and sometimes, very honestly, it does get a little tiring. But at that time, it's important to discuss it with your colleagues, discuss it with other special educators, and see what else could be done. Now, this is one step. Once you have probably trained in special education, you've got a few years of experience. After that, some people choose to specialize in, let's say, school counseling. Now, why this area? Because it's important to not only look at the special education aspect, but also look at the other aspect where you need to include a child into a school atmosphere that is going to be around them, right, throughout their life, whether it is today in school, tomorrow in college, or at the workplace. It is a challenge for them, very honestly, in the world that we are living in, right? So this is in terms of children and education, right? Sometimes special educators even have these online consultations, and I know a few of my colleagues and counterparts who actually provide maybe 24/7 intervention and service just to connect with a particular child, build their trust, right? So this is about special education counseling. And I thought probably the third part that I did want to discuss was about how the current situation is in India, right? So in India, we have, I think it's called Accessible India campaign, right? And I was reading about it where I did notice they started off this thing in around 2015, and their aim was to provide accessibility throughout. They just wanted to go all out and finish trying to give accessibility all over in government buildings and transport, this and that. Excellent initiative. But I don't mean to sound critical over here, but I think it's important that we discuss certain aspects where we also do have lags, we have our shortcomings, so that we could work together in order to try and bring some kind of change, right? So in this Accessible India campaign in 2015, when they started it off, what they said was, let us try and look at three aspects. So the key word over here is accessibility and inclusion. So for UN, it's inclusion. And in India, the fact that the campaign itself is called Accessible India Campaign is trying to provide an environment, as well as maybe secondly, the transport or public transport facilities. And third, in the area of IT and information technology. So these are the three areas under this Accessible India campaign. If you go to Google and you search, you'll probably see a picture of a person who is on a wheelchair, and it says Accessible India campaign. Now, what are the provisions under each of these? One, in the area of public transport, right? Whether it is a bus, whether it is a train, or in the airport, the idea is to provide ramps, provide services. You have those rugged paths, as I was mentioning before, in certain buildings where the person could actually move from the ground level to the first floor, in that particular building. So these were some of the inclusions that did come in the area of accessibility, right? The second is the environment. So the environment, sorry about that. Yeah. So in the environment, if we look at it, if it is in the workplace, right? I spoke about schools, special education teachers, inclusive schools, school counselors, and their role over here in education. Now, the aspect of work, right? After school, after college, then what? So in the area of work, there are, policies as well as acts that we have where we cannot discriminate a person based on their physical challenges or their emotional challenges or their cognitive challenges, right? So these are certain areas, certain acts that are there. But a challenge here also is the fact that a lot of social perceptions cannot be quickly changed, right? It takes time, it takes effort, enormous effort, I must say, for us to try and challenge ourselves and change our views on certain things. So this is the second area. Now, the third area, information and technology, as you noticed in our first video for the United Nations, right, the inclusion strategy that they had, while the person was speaking, and the video was being played, there was another person who was a sign translator next to them. Now, when I tried to sit back and reflect on, areas where probably in a small way we've improved in information technology, I thought of Alexa, right? We say, hello, Alexa, right? What's the weather today? Or maybe, hi, Google, what's the weather tomorrow, right? To us, that may sometimes seem like a privilege. Oh, I've got this new cool remote, and this particular action is being played on my desktop or by my phone. But to certain other people, right, who are finding it difficult, in order to understand access technology, this is a huge, big step for them, right? So when I actually sat down and looked at it in the area of probably information technology, there has been, or I can see visible changes. But even though we still have a lot on ground level to really move forward in, right? So this was about the information technology and what I wanted to talk about in Accessible India campaign. I'd like to, at the end of this session, also understand your views about how we as individuals, I'm going to keep it as an open-ended question for you all, because I think each one of us in some way or the other are privileged. It's a privilege for you and me to be a part of this Zoom meeting and actually talk about this, right? And many people out there don't have this opportunity. So I guess we're a bunch of 15 people here. Even if we go and talk about this to another 2 people in each of our lives, it's a ripple effect, right? And we're sharing a bit of our knowledge as well as trying to put certain things into practice. So I thought probably trying to, I don't know how many people actually try to critically analyze certain things, but I thought it would be nice to be informed also about, in this Accessible India campaign, what are some of the areas that are lagging? Because when we know the areas that are lagging, we could try in certain ways, either via campaigns or the change in the organization. There are campaigns that are there, since we know that an area of strength is actually IT, information processing, and technology. We could use that as a generation who knows how to use social media to the benefit of the differently able people around us. Because why not? You have the privilege, right? So rather than using all the privilege to yourself, why don't we try and give some of that privilege and help others in our community too, right? This was my taking from it when I reflected on it. So I shall again mute myself, share the screen, and while I play this video, take a minute and think about how many of these instances have you seen in your life in India, where there was a difficulty for a person who was challenged, right? And probably we could discuss that, or if you're not okay with unmuting yourself, you can always post your opinion on the chat box, all right?
Okay, Tanisha, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, shall I begin the video? Tanisha, were you going to say something?
No, Sneha.
Okay.
Continue with the video.
Okay, all right, yeah.
In the last 30 years, there is a lot that has happened. A lot of the new infrastructures, especially in urban India, is more accessible. But in terms of on-ground change due to the campaign, I think it has been extremely disappointing.
The rural environment is so different from the urban environment, and general lives of people with disabilities is so different that the standards need to address all that, which it doesn't presently.
Accessibility affects each one of us. Accessibility is that little flavor in life that makes life easier.
We are doing just what is a drop in the ocean, but what needs to be done is to make it universal, to make it mandatory, and that is the time we are waiting for.
Yes. So I hope all of you all got to see that video. And sorry, another video was playing in the background. Yeah. So I remember when I was seeing this video, something that did come to mind was, as you noticed, some people who are physically challenged, right, they find it difficult to ride. And some of them actually do have accommodations where they, in the car or in the bike, they're actually able to move around the place. As I said, accessibility, and as that lady mentioned, is a flavor for them, like how salt, pepper, mirchi, garam masala, all of that is flavor to us, right? For them, accessibility is a huge, huge aspect of their life. So keeping this in mind, one day when I was actually driving and I was in a hurry trying to get to work, and when we're in a hurry, sometimes we tend to get very irritated. So that was one of a typical days for me. And I did see somebody on the left hand side, and he was riding at his own pace. And he I think he was probably a polio victim, right? And one part of his leg was affected. And after seeing that, so my first reaction was to honk honk honk. And then For a second, I paused and I realized what I was doing. I am human for sure, and I did get irritable while driving and I was going on honking. But at the same time, I also did realize that sometimes we just take it for granted in our day to day lives when things are moving so swift and so fast. We don't have time to pause and, look around what's happening around us. So now I leave the stage open to Tanisha to take over from here. And after that, maybe if any of y'all have any feedback, ideas on how each one of us together could make this a more accessible place for people around us, it'll be great that you shared it, right? Share it. So, Tanisha, over to you now.
Yeah. So I will be discussing about the rights of people with disabilities. I'm going to start screen sharing now. Can you see my screen, Sneha?
Not. It
Yes.
says, yeah, it's showing post attendee Zoom to me.
Okay.
Do I need to make you the host?
I think I'm the co-host.
It's come.
Okay. So the Rights of Persons with Disability Act was passed out in 2016. The Rights of People with Disability Act replaced the Persons with Disabilities Act of 1995. The name is the Privilege Act arose after India signed and ratified the United Nations Convention on Rights of Persons with Disability in the year 2007. So the Rights of RPWD 2016 is made in accordance with obligations given in the UNCRPD Act, and the bill was passed 14th December. It started coming into force from 15th June 2017. Now I'm going to, since RPWD Act is a very vast and comprehensive act, I'm going to discuss only the key points of the act. So in previous Persons with Disabilities Act of 1995, there were only 7 disabilities listed there. In the RPWD Act of 2016, the list has been expanded from 7 to 21 conditions.
Tanisha, are you there?
I think we lost her.
No, she's there, but then I think for some reason the okay.
Was I disconnected?
Yes, you were disconnected, Tanisha. Yeah, you
just for a
start
second.
again.
Okay.
At the second
where
slide.
did I stop?
Second slide.
Okay. So
7 to 12 conditions.
Let me know if, yeah. Okay. So in the PWD Act, there were only 7 conditions. But in the RPWD Act, there are 21 ones, and it now includes cerebral palsy, dwarfism, muscular dystrophy, ACE attack victims, hard hearing and speech language disability, specific learning disabilities, autism spectrum disorders, chronic neurological disorders such as multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, blood disorders such as hemophilia, thalassemia, sickle cell anemia. So all these 21 conditions now come under RPWD Act. Now in the RPWD Act, there are list people are listed as benchmark disabilities, those who have at least 40% of any of previous disabilities like cerebral palsy.
Okay, Tanisha's been disconnected again.
Okay, where do I start from again?
Tanisha, can you share the PPT in the chat box? Can you do that? So that, someone from amongst us in the participant, we could do the screen sharing.
Okay. Give me a minute.
It says your bandwidth is low, so.
Hello.
Yeah. Yes, Tanisha.
Can you see in the box? Oh, okay. It's the file I have to put.
Yeah, you have to upload the file in the chat box.
Okay.
Tanisha, Blaya ba na nandito ba?
Blaya ba?
Ocha. Maybe nini network bo ibujaya ba ni janeru? Jaro niya de given.
Okay, ang PPT share kaya ining sila nang niya de?
De, okay.
Okay, so I'm going to do it with the PPT. Let me know, okay, if I get disconnected, Rakhi Abhi.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay. So the RPW, Rights of Persons with Disability Act, replaced the Persons with Disabilities Act of 1995, and then so RPWD Act contains 21 conditions for disability, which includes cerebral palsy, dwarfism, muscular dystrophy, and 21 lists of conditions are there. And so in the RPWD Act, benchmark, there's a quota for benchmark disabilities. So anyone with 40% of the listed 21 disabilities will be included in the Benchmark for Disabilities Act, benchmark for disabilities. So the RPWD Act provides the appropriate government shall ensure that persons with disability enjoy the right to equality, live life with dignity and respect for his or her own integrity, especially with others. The government is to take steps to utilize the capacity of the persons with disability by providing them appropriate environment. The RPWD Act also says that no persons with disability shall be discriminated on the ground of disability, and no person shall be deprived of his personal liberty on the ground of disability. So if you for a job, if you are disabled and you are able to do it, you would get the job. If you are not getting the job because of discrimination, then you can approach the law, and RPWD Act, any section of the RPWD Act which is applicable to you will be applied there. So measures are taken to protect persons with disability from being subjected to cruelty, inhuman and degrading treatment from all forms of abuse, violence, and exploitation. And for conducting research, if you are a researcher and you are wanting to research, an informed consent from persons with disability should be given them prior to permission from a committee for research on disability. So free and informed consent from persons with disability you should take, and you should take prior permission from committee for research on disability too. You cannot do any research work or collect data from them without permission. Sixth point is any persons. So if you suspect any person, if you have any reason to believe that an act of abuse, violence, or exploitation has been done, is likely to be done against any persons with a disability, you may give the information to the local executive magistrate, who will take immediate steps to stop or prevent its occurrence and pass appropriate order to protect the person from disability. Also, police officers, if they receive any complaint, then they can take action against the person. So they can educate the persons with disability on how to approach the nearest or working organization for their rehabilitation, their right to free legal aid, right to free complaint under the provision of this act, and any other law dealing with the offense. Now, equal protection safety in situations of risk, armed conflict, humanitarian emergencies, and natural disasters are to be provided to persons with disability. So, in case of any humanitarian crisis or armed conflict, just like any other citizens, they are also applicable for equal protection and safety. And the other point is, children with disability are not to be separated from parents except on the order of a competent court. Again, here, if the child or the children has to be separated from the parent, then the next of kin, children should go to the next of kin. And if the next of kin is not available, then children go to the community. Only when community is unable to take care of children, then children should go to shelter homes. Immediately, they should not be to shelter homes. Also, it ensures that all persons with disabilities enjoy legal capacity on equal basis with others in all aspects of life. Also, they have right to own and inherit movable and immovable property, as well as control their financial affairs. So, it's that if a person is disabled, then also she has equal right to own and inherit property, and also to control her own financial affairs. If he or she is capable, then definitely
yeah, Tanisha, okay, you're back.
Yeah. The bill, RPWD bill, also provides for the access to inclusive education, vocational training, self-employment of disabled persons without discrimination. Buildings, campuses, and various facilities are to be made accessible to persons with disability, and their special needs are to be addressed. So the bill provides, says that access to inclusive education should be there. So if the person is suffering from any kind of disability, the school has to if the school has to admit them, and if it is mandatory that no schools which are under the government of India or receive funding from the government of India, they should include admit children with disability. Not only they should include, but also provide inclusive education to them. Anyhow, they cannot admit and then they left at the corner of the room doing nothing. They should provide the right kind of education, inclusive and tailored to their needs. Vocational training is also there. Vocational training institutes, self-employment of disabled persons with discrimination. Okay, buildings, campuses, and various facilities are to be made accessible to persons with disability. So if you see buildings, schools, campuses, and any other place should be made accessible to persons with disability. It should be wheelchair accessible, lifts should be there, ramps should be there. So these kind of facilities should be available. Necessary schemes and programs to safeguard and promote persons with disability for living in the community are to be launched by the government. And appropriate healthcare measures, insurance schemes are also there provided by the government of India. Cultural life and recreation and sporting activities are also to be taken care of under the Persons with Disabilities Act. Also, all government institutions of higher education and those getting aid from the government are required to reserve at least 5% of the seats for people with benchmark disabilities. And 4% reservation for persons with benchmark disabilities is to be provided in posts of all government establishments with differential quota for different forms, forms of disabilities. And atrocities on persons with disabilities have been made punishable with imprisonment of 6 months extendable to 5 years with fine. And fraudulently availing of benefits meant for persons with disability has also been punishable. So if you're availing any benefit from government by faking a certificate or anything, it is a punishable offense. Now, in case of Assam, the social Assam, the Office of the State Commissioner for Persons with Disabilities in Assam was established as per the Persons with Disabilities Equal Opportunities Protection and Rights and Full Participation Act 1995. So the Assam State Commissioner for PWD was established under the PWD Act of 1995, and the office has been continuing under Section 79 of the RPWD Act of 2016. Next slide, please. So the implementation by Assam government for people with disabilities are, so before under the PWD Act of 1995, reservation in government posts done at 3% around the year of 1996, and promotion to third grade from grade 4 post allowed for persons with disabilities. Also, the government identified people with disabilities. So there were 7,765 members of disabilities around the year 2000. So orthopedic and around 1,067 numbers. Visually handicapped around 100, and hearing was around 100 something. And the state coordination committee and executive committee formed under WD Act, and state advisory board is being constituted under the Rights of People with Persons with Disabilities Act. So under the PWD Act, state advisory is being constituted. It has not been constituted till now, and the act was passed in 2016. For prevention and early identification, the government of Assam has held health melas, screening of age groups of persons around 16 to 14 years through National Health Mission. Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan and social welfare departments are working for Department of Visually Handicapped and Hearing Challenged persons. The government is also conducting immunization drives, leprosy eradication programs, supplementary nutrition programs, etc. So here, under the RPWD Act, screening of age group of persons around 6 to 14 years of age through NHM. So their report should have been out 2 years after the implementation of RPWD Act. So the bill was passed in 2016, and so the data should have been out by 2019 itself, but it is not out yet. Now, in the field of education, Assam government is giving free education to 6 to 18 years of children from 6 to 18 years. Special schools are being built, inclusive schools are there, free books are given, guidelines regarding written examinations like extra time, curriculum adapted for the visually impaired, etc. are there. So the government identified, this is data from 2018. Total children with disability was 1,782 numbers in schools. So this is the data. So scholarship school and technical education students was given at 2,100 per month and at 3,000 respectively. In the field of employment, government has done special recruitment drive in the year 2005 to 2006. After that, I know because no data has been given. Still, employment exchanges are there formed. There are 23 numbers of special employment exchanges where persons with disabilities go and look for opportunities in the field of jobs. Registered vocational training institutes are receiving aid from government since 1995. And initiatives under social security is the Krishna Kanta Handic State Open University is going to run courses for special education. A memorandum of understanding signed between KKHU and Rehabilitation Council of India for 500 seats. Special district camps are being conducted all over the state. Establishment of Higher Education Institute for Intellectually Disabled Children in the year 2017 to 18 was proposed. The state-owned priority scheme health grant, they're giving priority scheme health grant at ₹5,000 to disabled persons. That was proposed in the year 2017 to 18. These are the schemes and initiatives taken by the government of Assam. Now, lastly, I'm going to talk about disability etiquette, because we need to see a person with disability with dignity. So the number one is don't make assumptions. Ask before you help. Adults with disability want to be seen as independent people. Seek to understand them. Find commonalities before thinking about differences. Don't victimize people with disabilities. Don't casually say, oh, it's a person with spinal cord injury. Call them by their name if you know them, or ask them what their name is. Try to interact with them if you want to. Communicate respectfully, make eye contact, speak directly to them and not to their caregivers if you have a query, a question, or something to say. Be sensitive about physical contact. Avoid grabbing or holding their hands or playing with their equipments without permission. People with disabilities consider their equipment part of their personal space and put themselves first. Say persons with a disability rather than, oh, he or she is a disabled person. Okay, so I have come to the end. Can you hear me?
Yes, Tanisha.
Sneha, I have come to the end of my presentation. Anything else more to say?
No, nothing else. I think you covered a good deal under the act that's there and what is the current situation in Assam. And thank you for sharing that. It was very educative to many of us.
The net has been giving me so many problems.
So Tanisha, then what we can do is, I think we have a participant with us who has raised his hand. I think he wants to ask a question. So Nibosh Hasnu. Yeah, Sneha and Tanisha, if you, Nibosh, can you unmute yourself? And Tanisha, do you see that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, actually, Nibosh has asked a question in the chat box. Tanisha, would you like to take
I
the...
have logged in.
Okay, I'll ask the question on behalf of Nibosh, or Nibosh, you can unmute and then you can ask your question. Go ahead.
Hello.
Nibosh,
जी जी
ning aning question shingla niya de Nibosh.
ira jine dima haza wala disability sara wala la shla free bala free do ira la mat subida maya la free ka bo de he sagra bo help maya bo ne bare a kisha help tips trip ko la kisha hapno no mo bo sakri ne haba nang lai ba bo to ha
Tanisha?
So Nibo ang exactly Mitya, but as far as I know, Department of Social Special Job Social Welfare Nishing Social Welfare Nishing Mashmagin Jobs by Gudu Bangya or the special job exchanges do Dimas or Dongna Gidia Mitya or the Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities dong Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment ni under ha or ha employers ni loan dong do education loan dong or jobs dong training dong exact bisang do yang mitya uli dong bunchi number bo dong angkat mainan. Sneha?
Yes.
Yeah, so Nibosh is asking if you can give any tips or anything regarding employment, any directions on employment. So he's saying, he's asking about that for any disabled persons.
Right. So, from whatever that I read and I was aware of, I think there are companies and there should not be any discrimination in terms of employment. But I'm not very sure of any examples of any companies as such. Maybe if either you or any of the other participants know anything in that regard, I think it would be great if they could probably share that on the chat box so that it helps Nibosh. One new message. Yeah, somebody has shared something, disability jobs in India. They've shared a website. I think Celeste has shared it. Nibosh, you can probably take a look at that website that is in the chat box. Tanisha, I hope that answered or helped him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Uh, I guess the last the presentation that PowerPoint presentation that Tanisha highlighted regarding the Assam, the provisions under the government of Assam. So I suppose that, like, for all the government institutions, there has to be a certain, the quota is already there. So
Yeah.
I guess, and if they are not implementing that quota, obviously, I think we can, take legal recourse if
Yes.
that's not happening. We know that. So I think in Nibosh's case also, I know that in our district, the problem is in the implementation of a lot of this, not just in the district. I think overall, I think in India there is lesser awareness when it comes to the opportunities and the kind of provisions that the government has provided. So first of all, we have to take care about the awareness, spreading awareness regarding the provisions. And then after that, if the institutions are not implementing those provisions, then obviously I think Nibosh himself can, or even the local community can take the legal means to make sure that those provisions are being implemented. So I think that is what that is all I can add here. Even I'm not very sure. Tanisha ning bishli mitsdu jini urani district ha man ibu implementation but council habo jama lanang rebu. I'm sorry Sneha, because the participant Nibosh is like, Nibosh actually sent he shared his message in Dimasa. After that, I'm assuming that he might not be able to communicate best in English, so that's why I'm trying to speak in Dimasa here. So Tanisha mane graude de zaman nang re that jini urawa provisions dong giri uli de janang ya ar since 1995 ni ahon ha ibu legal ibu butul labu na government of Assam habo. So obviously I think jini council habo dong bare dong nai du ska bo dwa hajing jar shinghima nangma or the implement klayat ska obviously raha jing through legal means jing ibu claif nang or
Claifna. Or the Graulaja Boka by Gohatske 3%, 4% Sinti quota, Shbungza Bokala Bangbi disabilities Jangdong Eba, Obani job by Maiba Havo Dukuja Dugo.
Dede jama she.
Yeah, मेरा तो
Rigrong Eba say.
Ada regrungnya disability social welfare baik apa jangan sebung jangan buta apa konsil baik apa politician nation te priba hak se disability nama je kuta maya.
Mane disability ni quota ke bishi implement khan kla ya go quota ya ba
Kena
khana
kibina phaila kaba dia ya buta ni sebung ni sing dilaba sara politician ya hadong buseng.
Quota la implement zaman nang re books ka jinura hala janjaya hi thoba go uli zaman nang
Tapi nudu sabar riba bisi jangan sebung ni kasa ritalado.
Uli batskade legally langlay matskade RPWD Act ni bishingha executive magistrate district ni ha complaint rihima or otherwise jarning legal course lalama uli shing bula he is currently discriminating klejo bas that's matskala
discrimination she
ubani bula shpuni basawa
dia apa macam pension maya apa bo 2016 apa bonda langka asam ko bo matau dada ding bas dada oli problem seda.
So ulining ode he iska bo district ni by ji habo acha Tanisha, the thing that you mentioned about the special employment exchange programs, right? So what about that? Are those working efficiently outside the district?
No. So various surveys have been done, and so in theory, they are saying that special employment exchanges should be there, but in reality, the number is very less. So that is the present scenario all over India, not only in Assam.
Okay. Yeah, only Mane Angbo, today actually is the first time I actually came across this special employment exchange program. So I also wanted to ask another thing to both Sneha and Tanisha. So we have so in higher education institutions, if such like special arrangements are if are they are not being done for students with disabilities and other staff members or people with disabilities who are part of the college I mean who are working or studying there at the higher education institutions. So I mean so the administration is supposed to do that, but for some reason they have not been doing that, or they have not been able to do that. So in that case also, is that punishable, like or I mean, what are how do we go about making the campuses of higher education institutions in the country more accessible for people with disabilities? Can we I mean, what is the solution with regards to that?
Yeah. So, Raki, generally the situation is in higher education institutions. It is a prerequisite and it's mandatory, irrespective of whether it's a student or a person who's an employee or administrative staff over there, that they have to have inclusions in their respective educational institutions. And
Mhm.
in most of the higher education institutions, they do have provisions. I'm not quite sure of the implementation levels, as you did say, but I do know a few institutions that do implement it. At least in Bangalore, from what I have seen in higher education institutions, I'm not very sure of other places, but I definitely think that it is something that is very critical or important in their overall plan. Even when they're making the buildings, it's a must, it has to be there. And if it's not there, then I think definitely there should be a particular what do I say, it an offense or certain stringent actions that need to be taken. So I'm pretty sure there is something in line with that.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, also in government funded and government institutions, uh, so the whole structure of the building should be accessible to people with disability. So there should be ramps, there should be lifts, there should be places where a wheelchair can pass. Even the toilets should be there for ease of people with disability. So all these facilities should be there in government funded institutions or government buildings too, but we don't see a lot of it, especially in Assam. We don't.
Yeah, yeah. So that was quite, I mean, strikingly visible when I I hear in the education institutions. There's quite a difference that you see when you go outside and you see look at other educational institutions. You see, I mean, to a certain extent, all these provisions are provided, but I think here when it comes to interior areas, probably there is an issue. There is a lot of gap there. Anyone else who'd like to ask anything?
Yes, yes.
We can
I
take
read.
up
Yeah,
a few
it's
more
not a
questions.
question, but it's a comment. Usually we term this people as physically disabled or disabilities. Why this nomenclature? Don't you think it's harmful for their self-affirmation? Because when I was doing my coursework, there was a blind student, and she could do different things which we can't. Like she can read a book that is without any print, like they have certain things dots there which they can touch, and so they can do certain things which we can't do. So rather than saying disability, I think they should be called specially abled or with differently able. Can you please comment on that?
I think you're definitely right, Chiranjeev, regarding that. And as a counselor, I can definitely say that their self-efficacy, their self-esteem, all of that to a large extent does get affected by the way people around them address them also. Like, for example, a person who has mental illness, if you're going to say that person is mentally ill, it's often going to add more into the social stigma that's attached. And same thing in the case of differently abled. This is definitely something we do need to keep in mind. But at the same time, Chiranjeev, it's also important to look at one more side of it, which is, as much as maybe you, me, and a few of us over here are open to, changing and focusing on ourselves and trying to bring about some difference, there are a large bunch of people who just still want to stick on to, their previous vocabulary, use the word disabled, and many of them I have seen take pride in saying what they say that way, even though it's not helpful or beneficial to others. In fact, yesterday when I saw a movie, there was a person who, as you mentioned, was differently abled in a certain way in an institution, engineering. And because he was different in certain abilities, he was actually killed and he was bullied a lot. So, this is certain really harsh realities that we are still going through. But I'm really glad that you did speak about it, because the kind of words we use, the language, the lingo, all of that really matters. And thank you for bringing that up.
There is a question from Firoz. He asks, I have a friend who has completed his master degree in life science and bioinformatics. He has a hearing problem and communicates through messages. So can he get the disability certificate?
So he has to go to a medical officer, and the medical officer will assess how much disability he has, and then on the basis of that, he will get a disability. He might or might not get a disability certificate. So it depends on that.
Okay. So if anyone else would like to ask or comment. Yeah, I wanted to ask another thing to both the speakers here today, Tanisha and Sneha. So the thing is, like sometimes what happens in our society is that a lot of times the family members of the persons with disabilities, I'm sorry Chiranjeev, I mean yeah, differently abled or persons with disabilities, either way, I guess I don't know. Sometimes I get it. I get what you were talking about, but sometimes I think we stick to the semantics too much, and sometimes I don't know. Yeah, there are a lot of conflicts when it comes to regarding the nomenclature itself. But anyway, so my question was. A lot of the times what happens is that the family members of people with disabilities, I mean, they have a hard time coming around to accepting their children or the family members, they have a hard time accepting that these are people with special needs, and not just accepting. I think even after that, most of the time they do not get the kind of support, and they do not get the kind of help, and even I think mental support that is actually required, even of the more of the caregivers, right, more than the persons with disabilities. I mean, the persons with disabilities, of course, they need special care, but then even the caregivers also, I think it can be very exhausting, and it can be very mentally, I think it takes a lot out of you. So what about what do we do when we're talking about persons with disabilities? Are we also talking about their family members, the caregivers, and the larger society where these people, we have to all live together. So what kind of discussions are we having about them here in the the larger scenario? How does it all work?
I think, Raki, that's very, very important. Caregivers are the ones who are there 24/7 with the differently abled people, and they get burnt out. Like, I can say that whether it is emotional or mental or physical, irrespective of what the change or the challenge is, um, exhaustion in caregivers is rampant. It is till date something that many caregivers struggle with. A lot of it is not discussed, mainly because when caregivers, when they're there 24/7, so they constantly need to have one, patience, secondly a lot of compassion when they're dealing with the person, right? And there are many research studies which focus on something called compassion fatigue. So when you keep giving compassion, you're being kind, trying to understand, sometimes it gets really frustrating. You get really exhausted and tired. So something that of late that I have been noticing, and in fact, if I do come across caregivers, I've always spoken about, it's important that you speak about your fatigue, you speak about your exhaustion, and find help. It's not only your family member who needs support, but it is also you. And I say a lot of this even from my personal experience, that as a caregiver, it is important that you take care of your mental health also, because without that, it's only going to be fatigue. And just like any other child who can quickly notice if an adult is not interested in them, your family member who is facing the challenge will immediately pick it up and start feeling like as though they are to blame over here, right? So for caregivers, please talk to people around you, whether it is your neighbors, whether you want to speak to a professional, whoever it is important that you focus on your compassion levels also. And this is, in fact, it's a beautiful point that you brought about. Somewhere it was missed out in what we discussed today. So you bringing this point up is also important for future discussions, to look at that lens or aspect, that caregiving also is taxing.
Yeah. Tanisha, would you like to add something to that?
No, I think Sneha has pretty much covered it. Okay. So one more.
Within our own communities, we
Yeah.
hardly have such discussions, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what is
Yeah.
the scenario
So
at home, where I don't think we are having any discussions about disabilities? I mean, look at what Nibosh is going through. He says, when it even comes to the institutional mechanisms back home, right? So I mean, people are least bothered, and they are, I think, giving away those positions, to those posts, jobs, to people who are to regular people. So lot is needed to be done back home regarding this area.
Yeah. So people have to become more conscious, aware of their needs. Also, social body organizations have to check whether these things are happening or not. So it's a responsibility of social organizations and NGOs also, not only people differently abled people, but social organizations have also keep a check on what is happening regarding jobs, regarding funds, where is it going. So all this have to be taken into account.
Yeah.
And I think so the conversation that we're having, it's only starting because of today's webinar. So more such conversations have to be there for us to grow, to know more about it, and then only we can take some kind of action. Because ultimately we have to be aware of our rights, of what is going on, what is happening, and only then like
Okay, Tanisha, I think we lost you again. Do we have any more questions or comments? Okay. Tanisha, are you there? You'll have to unmute yourself, Tanisha.
yes, I'm here. Hello.
Yeah, Tanisha, go on.
Yeah. So we have what I was saying was we have to be aware ourselves, and then only skang thang fumajing nadija du jaya mitzima nekeda and conversations ili domanang du dini ni bosh chiban si jingbo mitzba nadija du jaya dima hasauha scenario otherwise jing bauladu je disabled spum tu ni khota dong 3% might do jobs dong si paper ala nudu, but in reality nadi uliaba conversations den kase mitzma chichba.
Okay. So I guess we don't have any more questions or yeah, Nibosh, you have ning unmute le ba Nibosh aspat sima ko ni.
go bo ma'am logo hemba go logom don la asam state ko pala na try clip nang da.
Okay, so locomotor disability nebo Jondo ani pipitihan tong babrabe ang nahanang ko. Special aids and appliances government charau ridu Assam state headquarter social welfare headquarter nching shale kade mine do bunchi Bhagwan Mahavir Viklang Sahitya di Jaipur Furnishing special aids ridu or the artificial limbs manufacturing corporation of India Limco Nchingbo ridu jinis puto or the locomotor disability tunekla bus ka ba state bus 100% concession rang rimanangya or the government traveling keba 2 seats reserved dong do uli siri ang puri ba mai ba
English ba ang buji du kala talking chung buja ba English
Buna udah
ashba kamo habli hidong ba
Abu Celesti bo nadi bu PDF files bren hai habala ni bosh ning chat hanuka. Chat box ha. Ni bosh ning mute jalang laba. Anyway, so bu files butu ke jing yahon at skabo hai hafnang. Skala bidi heklema ek minute अच्छा Nipo ang nine jini era mashi phone number hai hadu. So ning ede klay funang yahon na jing message klay ha. Ode he jing mane nadi kaza information nang du era files brand bo jing nadi kaza share klay ka bukin ine yahon na phone habo hai re ha funang. Na main kada na phone number ke jini phone number. So ibu phone number habo yahon na ning jine ibu hai ha funang jing nine hai ha funang ning message klay da ha jing ki. So anyway, so I think yeah, Tanisha, if I think we don't have any further comments or questions, then perhaps we can wrap it up for today.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. So I think we had a wonderful discussion. Thank you so much, Sneha, for joining us. Tanisha, I think you introduced a wonderful person to the Master Scholars League today. It was such a pleasure hearing you, Sneha. Both your presentations were really good, and I think it is our collective responsibility at the beginning at the individual level, because what Sneha spoke about, like when it comes to the making the world more inclusive. Firstly, I think we have to have compassion. So we have to begin there at the individual level, and then we have to work towards of course the effort has to be collective, so we have to make it social. And then perhaps if the social inclusion happens of persons with disabilities, of the differently abled people, then of course then we can next talk about economic and political inclusion, which is what the talk today we wanted to focus on. That is the overall inclusion of persons with disabilities, and how we make our world a better world for all the differently able people as well, and not just for the others. So that was it. Thank you so much, Sneha, once again for joining us. It was such a pleasure. And I hope that this is only the beginning, and we will have a lot more discussions with you. And so that in the future also we can interact more. We hope that you will be joining us. And yeah, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rakhi. And thank you so much to Tanisha and all of you too. Thank you.
Okay, then we'll be signing out here now. Thank you to all.